member, could you give your name? And just let us know who you are real quick, and then that way by the time we get to March, we know each other. So we'll start with Dennis.
Dennis Bailey, Vice President of Student Services.
Michael Mangan, I teach history, faculty senate.
Ian Hazel, Dean, Health, Athletics, Wellness, and Kinesiology.
Robin McFarland, Biology and Faculty Vice. Barbara Schultz Perez, Counseling and Co-Vice President of CPC.
Colton Willie, Vice President of Student Center.
Sarah Dow, Mass Vision, Vision Coordinator.
Alex Howick, Math Department, and Faculty Senate Representative.
Victoria Lewis, Vice President of Administrative Services.
Business office, Foxy for Tatiana.
Graciana Mendoza, Business Services.
Terrence Willard, Planning and Research, and I'm just a guest.
And Conrad.
Conrad Scott Curtis, CCFT in English.
All right, so we did.
And you are?
I do, I don't know today. Check back with me later. Today we wanted to continue to let people have a chance to actually talk about their reserves. It's not everybody's had a chance to talk. So I've asked Victoria to continue that discussion just a tad.
So we have a slide that we have shown here at CPC in the past. So for new members, Graciana, do you want to go over the slide for us so that we can set the context?
Sure. This slide is the same slide that was presented earlier in the 14-15 fiscal year. And it's based on actual information. So it's based on the actual fund balance at the end of each fiscal year. And if you look to the right on fiscal year 13-14, in totality, the fund balance for restricted and unrestricted general fund was approximately $13.1 million. And it's broken out into various categories. And what we try to do in color is to show you what those various categories are. And working our way from the bottom up, the burgundy is representing the restricted fund balance, so your categoricals. The green is community ed. The purple is the unrestricted general fund required reserve, which is part of the conversation we had at our last meeting. It's the 5% reserve. And then we had, at that point in time, allocated towards the deficit, and you see that in blue. And then we had, at that time, an FTS reserve in orange, and a carryover one time, which goes towards departments, so it's owned by the departments. And we also have, at the very end, the kind of a purplish dark blue at the very end, which says it's the undesignated, unrestricted fund. So that piece was remaining for allocation. So does that kind of give a...
Yes, and so I guess the one thing we want to point out, especially for new members, is sometimes the term reserve and ending balance are used interchangeably, and they're not the same thing. We do have reserves that are set aside for a specific purpose, like you see the general reserve. But there is a majority of our ending balance that has already been allocated. And as Graciana said, the carryover and one-time funds have been used for program planning. So the allocation that CPC reviewed early in the fall was to take some of our one-time monies and allocate those towards program planning. So that's what you see in the blue there. And the orange, the balance of the FTES reserve has been transferred to the operating reserve. And the operating reserve has been used to do things like bridge the deficit. I think, as I mentioned our last meeting, we've used that for facilities emergencies. We've used it for a number of different things, but that is a reserve that we allocate and spend. So, so we just wanted to kind of bring that back, because the last time we posed a question that was very general, and it was purposely general to get your perspective. And now we're giving you more detailed information. And so I think we'd like to hear from those folks who didn't have an opportunity to give us their perspective on how, what you'd like us to see us do with reserves. And so.
Can I just
I'd like to-
question, just
Mhm.
when you said
Sure.
operating reserves now, where does operating reserves fit in all this stuff? When you said you moved the
So it
FDS
would be
reserve into
the-
operating reserves.
Yeah, so it would be the unallocated portion of the reserve,
The dark blue edge.
yes.
So when you asked the questions, what do you want to do with the general reserve? That was the state mandated general reserve.
No, it was reserves. What would you like us to do with reserves? And we were purposely asking you because there has been some confusion around the difference between the ending balance and reserves. So, one, I wanted to point out that the ending balance, a lot of times we hear, oh, the ending balance is $14 million or it's $16 million. I just wanted to point out that a large portion of that ending balance is already allocated towards specific items. And so the amount that's available for us to allocate is much smaller.
I guess I'm back to when you said general reserve and operating reserve in your
Mhm.
question. Since a lot of it's allocated, there's really nothing we can say about the allocated stuff.
It's the operating
It's the
reserve.
operating reserve, which is the unrestricted undesignated.
Right, and that was the total, that was the sheet I gave out the last time, and I said the balance was $1.7 million.
That's
As
the
a,
operating reserve.
Mhm.
But you also asked about the general reserve. I have two questions.
yes, I did.
The general reserve is the entire $14 million or the required reserve, 5%.
The 5% required reserve is part of the ending balance,
I get it.
as is the operating reserve.
So they want to know, do you want to know what they want to have done with the operating reserves only, or all the reserves that you've noted on the sheet?
Either one, I'd just like to get your perspective on the discussion we have every year, which is the ending balance and reserves.
So some people spoke, some people did not, some people needed time to think. After yesterday's participatory governance strategy.
I'll speak,
time
to the
to-
extent that, what I heard last time that Conrad said, I thought made a lot of sense in terms of, contextual, what are other colleges in the state, holding as their reserve to do. I'm looking at about 13 million in 13, 14, say, in the last year, so that's roughly 20%-ish reserve, I assume, and total. And I don't know if you expect it to be somewhere between, 15 and 25 reserve, or what the midpoint is, but I would expect us to try to land on the state is giving us money to spend on our students and on the college now. And for us to constantly, if we ever have reserves, to put it off and never spend it, I think that's an injustice also. Fiscal prudence has its place, but it shouldn't dominate all of our decisions. So I would hope that the reserve would land perhaps something lower than a 20% level, more like a 15% level or something like that. So that would be exactly about 10 million as opposed to 12 million. That's a comfortable place for, I think it's still in the middle of the pack on the state. That would probably be what I think the state might be expecting us to hold reserve. I don't know exactly when we ever dip into the required reserve, the purple. I mean, what that Armageddon situation looks like, because you always have to have it for a really bad day. I don't know when that is in terms of kicking in, but if it's there for something, payroll or something. And what we do with the rest of it, I'd like to see us continue to fund program planning and funding the plans that come out of that. I think that's really helpful for the college to show that process has a budgetary payoff at the end of it, literally. And I would like to see salaries addressed at the college with whatever's left over. I'd like to see something go to salaries in this campus soon. I feel like we lost some years there between '03 and '08 where we were excessively conservative. We fell behind the rest of the state in our pay, and we're still paying that price. So our reserves have been healthy and our salaries have not.
I just wanted to make one clarification. So this is one-time money, not ongoing money.
Okay, so salaries is on the table, but we're not going to discuss that because we're not going to bargain, but we have it there. Go ahead.
So, I feel like I spoke a fair amount last time, but I'm not sure I ever answered the questions.
Wow.
Is that
That's
fair?
like a huge admission.
I will admit to it, no, it's not a huge admission for me to admit
Go ahead.
to.
I'm glad you guys called the questions.
I feel like I was mostly asking questions, but if I'm gonna answer those questions, I guess I would look at a lot of that and say, so much of it seems to be allocated, that the only thing I could really address is the required general fund, 5%, and the unrestricted, undesignated, let's call it operating reserve and general reserve. That's how I kind of saw it. And so, from my perspective, a 5% general reserve, the state mandated minimum, has served us well for many years through some of the darkest budget times we've ever seen. And I understand we possibly might have some dark times coming, but it seems to me that a 5% reserve is prudent. And I don't see a reason to change that up or down. And when it comes to the undesignated unrestricted general fund, operating reserve, I think we've done pretty well with finding good places to spend it in the past, and that includes things like supporting program plan objectives. But I too feel a bit restricted in my own pocket. And so, not salaries, but I would say spend a fraction of that on a bonus. That's not a salary, it's a bonus. A one-time bonus. And then spend the rest of it on all our other.
Okay, others?
I have a question about the raise from 5% to 6 and then 7 in order to be, the plan was is to use the one-time money for that, to make the general reserve up to 7%. This is because we're not in a good situation to get bonds that we need to be, we need to have our credit be good. Is that credit worthy for loans? Is that the main reason we're doing that up to 7%?
Well, so, one of the things that we've done here in the past, and I think I will bring it back, is we have at the state level something called a fiscal checklist. And it requires a district to look at a number of factors to determine the fiscal health of the organization. One of the questions asks whether your revenue streams are stable. Is your enrollment stable? Are your operations stable? And all of these questions lead us to make a conclusion about what makes sense in terms of the reserve levels to maintain. So as you're going into a difficult budget time where you may be losing revenue like we are, if that occurs, it gives you more of a cushion so that the college would have time to make decisions in a thoughtful way, and we've done that here successfully through the bad budget times, I think, the last several years. It doesn't alleviate the need to make cuts, permanent cuts, but it does give us time. So if we were to eliminate the operating reserve and get down to the 5%, it's possible we might have a shorter period of time to make really difficult decisions that have a permanent impact on the college and the students.
Yeah. I know you're new, but do you have a thought you would like to share with us?
I guess my first out of a question would be the bump from 5 to 7% on the required reserve. Would it serve that same function where that extra 2% would not be touched unless some type of extreme situation were to occur? Would that be the intention of the extra 2% there?
Yeah.
That's completely up to the board in terms of how they were to utilize that.
Then in that case, I guess I would have to personally side on the side of fiscal prudence. It seems to me that in the history of this organization, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, that Cabrillo fared better than they could have due to the enrollment drops and the budget cuts and all those things, due to the fact that we had an FTE as reserve to kind of cushion ourselves. So I think that, I guess I would err on the side of caution.
I felt like you answered the question. Do you feel like you answered the question last time? Do you know what you want to say?
I feel like I answered the question. I never really at a loss for words.
Well, then I'm gonna move around the table to those that I know didn't before we come back. And I know the person next to you did not. Are you ready to answer this question?
Well, first of all, I don't see the rationale for increasing our required reserve over the 5%. In fact, it is over 5% because it was based on a $60 million budget. And that's the required minimum, and we have never come close to touching it in my years here, in terms of diminishing it. I would like to see, I actually have a question, even though it's been explained to me over and over. On the sheet of the one-time, operating reserves, unrestricted general fund ending balance is 1.4 million. How is that represented on here?
Well, this is a snapshot for 13-14, and the sheet that I gave you the last time is the current status.
It's
of the-
14-15, right,
Of the
okay.
operating reserve, so it is
Okay,
different.
so it's a different amount, that
It
would be
is.
the amount, okay,
It
so
is.
is that the dark purple on the top?
Yes, it is.
Some color. Okay. So that says undesignated, but this one says includes carryover one time. But on that chart, carryover one time is a different color.
Yeah, it's a mix, that's a mixture of.
This is a mixture of
So
all of that?
This chart tracks our ending balance when we close the books June 30th, as of June 30th. What I give you periodically is a snapshot of where we are in terms of our reserves since the budget has been adopted. So there are differences that are always occurring throughout the year.
But if I put together unrestricted, which is, it's not designated for anything, it's not carryover in various programs,
Right.
and the carryover one time, for each of these years, we're looking at 6 million?
Right, so
Put it
if you
together.
if you look at the carryover one time, and this is a product of the budget, the deferrals that we've had, we had to freeze carryover and one-time balances that were allocated to departments for a couple of years because our cash flow was so low.
Mhm.
And so over time, those balances increased, and departments, we just asked departments not to spend. And so when we released those funds, probably really only about a year ago, a year and a half ago, we released all those funds. And because there was so much that had accumulated, departments are still catching up with spending those funds. But we did a fair amount of reallocation this past year to program planning needs. So I think you're gonna see that gap get smaller as we reallocate and spend down the carryover one-time balances that had accumulated.
So I would have to say that in terms of things that have been put off and we just haven't been able to spend, I would say compensation for faculty in whatever form we can work it out, would be a top priority. That's probably the one thing that's remained low and has not been allocated to sufficiently.
Okay, so we're gonna move on with the people that are actually on the committee to make sure that, no, I'm just letting you know that I prioritize, but I'll come back. I don't think you said anything.
I did not say.
So would you like to give us your 2 cents?
I'll give my 2 cents. I'm new, so, you know, but I think it's obviously important to have a reserve, especially since we're facing very difficult times possibly. But I think from what I've heard, the 5% reserve seems like a reasonable thing to maintain. So I would not be in favor of raising it to 7%. I'm not sure that I have been convinced that that's our best strategy. In terms of the priorities of how to spend it, it's very important to maintain the spending for the program planning. So I know, even as my experience as department chair, that those funds were very important to our operation. So that would be one of my priorities. The other thing that I'm concerned about, of course, is compensation. So that is definitely something that should be discussed. And then there's something that was mentioned that I think is also a consideration, and that is facilities. You mentioned like emergencies and things like that. And our facilities have taken a hit in the budget crisis. So things like janitorial service and so it's obviously this is a hard discussion. It's a pie that's this big, and we have this much need. So, but my priorities would be the program planning, compensation, and then emergency facilities.
Ian, I believe you made a statement last time, at least I have it in the minutes.
Yes, but it wasn't a very serious one, was it?
I'm going to come back to you because you stated it, and I'm moving on to the next person,
It's
and I
about
will
taking
come
the
back to
reserves to Las Vegas, as I
I
recall.
will come back to
Well, it's good.
there are consequences to your actions, so we're moving on.
Can I just highlight what the last thing he said? He said that's because we didn't know what we were talking about.
Right.
Well, whenever there's a pregnant pause, I always feel as though I have to say something funny or intelligent. And it had to be funny because I had nothing intelligent to say.
Okay, we're gonna come back because there were some people that said nothing, so I just want to make sure we capture all that. I believe you said something. Alta? Ms. Holt? Did I have Alta down? Yes, I did. Kathy, did I have you down?
I don't think you have me down, right?
I don't think so either. I tried to memorize them all. I don't think so.
So one thing that I have been thinking about as I've listened to everything is our reserves have gotten us through very difficult times. I've heard that said, and I believe that. I know we've got some difficult times ahead, so I'm in favor of strong, healthy reserves. I also love what I've been hearing about program planning because until Laurel came, it wasn't seriously taken when programs seriously wrote their program plans. There was no expectation really for several years of getting those requests funded. So I'm very much wanting to keep that as a priority for our program plans. And the other thing is I know we have a lot of facility and equipment needs. And I'm also knowing that if we have some major instructional equipment failure, we don't have a way to fund it except from our reserves.
So we'll go back to Conrad, then we'll go back to Ian.
Can I defer from it?
Sure.
Yeah, because of what Kathy was just saying. I want to process
Okay, all right. Ian?
Yeah, so I don't really, I see the importance of a strong reserve. 5 or 7%, I'm easy out of it. I'm also hypersensitive to salary issues on the table. But I also am aware it's one-time funding, and if we did anything with salary, we couldn't sustain it. Now, in the spirit of a strategic comment, and I am very entrepreneurially thinking, I would look for ways to spend my unrestricted reserve that would raise additional funding for a sustainable, ongoing basis for the future, that then could support the salaries that we're looking for, the program plan that we want to sort of. So one big thing, and I know Dennis will have a fit on it, is an English language or an international recruitment centre for students from overseas coming to our campus in large numbers, paying triple probably or quadruple whatever is the going rate for credit.
And stays here.
And stay here. And I would look into, and you might laugh at this, but I've thought about it before, it's come up in
Well, I'm
other
laughing already.
But John,
I was the,
we
I was the.
we've got such a we've got a lot of facility across the road, probably one of the best locations I've come across around here. And we've been looking at the facility across the road. And we've been talking about things like, soccer tourism and other things. We need a hotel up down the street over there. And we would lease it, make money off it, and all kinds of international students would come and fill it for us. Again, we would make some more money from doing that. And all kinds of sports tours would come to do academy things in the summer when we're not busy. And that would then be sustainable, we'd keep it going, and we would make some serious profit from that. We would put that into our budget, and then we would pay everybody more.
Okay.
So, I guess I have two questions. One is, if the unrestricted general fund can be used to cover expenses, I still don't quite see the logic of moving part of it to the general fund. It gets figured differently by the state, in the general reserve, I mean, if it's moved from unrestricted,
So
undesignated.
So we
to-
report at the end of the fiscal year, we have something called the 311 report that I think you're familiar with. And it requires us to break down our ending balance in this manner and show the state what our resources are, what they're designated for, and what we have set aside as our general reserve.
Yes.
So yes, we do have to report on that.
So it's reported separately, but if the logic is to have rainy day fund, what's the gain by moving it to general reserve from undesignated?
It's really just to ensure that we have an added cushion in case our reserves are below what we anticipate. And so part of how we build the operating reserve is through budget savings. So at the end of the year, when we close the books, and we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
So, and that's why it's one time, because we build our budget based on an assumption, for example, that all of our positions will be filled throughout the whole year.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is that positions are vacated, and there is a lapse in timing between the time they're vacated and they're filled, or sometimes they're not refilled. So that can generate budget savings. There can be operating balances that are unspent, supplies, other categories of expenditures that aren't fully expended by the end of the year. So that's how we build the operating reserve.
And, okay, that's what, my other question is, this is a really naive question, but if all of that $6 million is waiting to be spent by departments, which is basically what we've heard about, carry over one time, do our departments have the capacity to spend $6 million?
I don't think it's pretty close, it was pretty close to 5 though,
Or
right?
five, yeah, 5 something.
It's 3 to 5.
Right. 6 up to 11.
So, I mean,
5.3.
Thanks.
5.3.
so, it's not likely that it will all be expended. Sometimes expenditures cross the fiscal year. Sometimes they're for large items like facilities or IT projects that are all, so there are large expenditures. But when we get towards the end of the year, my guess is that we will not have expended all those program plan dollars.
We spent a couple million on IT refresh this year, so some of that will, right?
It was restricted money, some of it was
Some of it was
restricted.
carryover, because I used some of my carryover for this and that, so.
Yeah, but restricted for the labs and the carryover for the faculty.
Right.
So it's a
We
combination.
could bring a report back as to where we are. I just asked the business office to run a report for me about where we are.
Right, I mean, because, my question is just if that's grown because of deferrals.
No, no,
I
it
thought you said it had
hasn't.
grown.
It hasn't, because this past year, the state has been eliminating the deferrals.
Right, no, I
so it
understand
has-
that, but historically, I thought I heard somebody say that it had grown
Yeah, it
because
had.
of deferrals.
Yes, it had grown because of deferrals. And there were some reallocations that were made when Laurel started toward program planning.
Just, if historically it's very different from where it has been, why, quite understand the use of just keep it there. If in fact people don't have capacity, that's a lot of money.
Okay, so, yes.
Can I think I just need to follow this a little bit better for myself. You can sit by me.
I was gonna look at you.
I'm all in favor of faculty raises, I'm a fan. But I'm also in favor of any kind of bonus that can come down the line. I would like to know, and this is just gonna be some of what Alex says is, we can do in course or whatever, but a couple of years ago, we laid off a lot of people in our unit, and we never got smaller as a college. And we laid those people off and still reached for 10,887. Now we are in a place where our savings had to support what we were doing in order to maintain our level at 10,887. We're about to face some more cuts, even though the money that's coming in is supposed to generate a new population, it's still the same money. So I don't know why I would take from my savings and move to my checking account, and I'm speaking my own language, why I would take from my savings to move to my checking account, something my checking account can't typically support. Does that make sense? My checking accounts can't sustain where we are now, so I can't keep moving from my savings to my checking account, hoping that one day it'll sustain itself. I also don't want to continue to have to cut my expenses to build my savings account. So I'm trying to figure out how we get to a place where our savings account is healthy, so that when we do have to make cuts or go through some things, we're not in a dire situation where we're searching for money because we got too close to the end of our savings account. I don't want to be at payroll for 3 months before we decide, oh shoot, we have 6 more months to sustain. So I guess my question is while 5% is a state mandate or a state minimum, what is, I think this was asked at the last time, what is a standard that people may have across the state that suggests health for an organization our size? It's different if you say Modesto or Fresno, because those aren't real. But when we talk about organizations that
They are
have,
Modesto and Fresno.
what do we look like to maintain a college this size with our infrastructure, our salary needs, and our growth to provide the services that everyone says they want from us? What's healthy to keep that covered?
So I believe that was one of our tasks from last week, was to go back and look to see whether or not we could find some of that data. If I'm not mistaken, that was part of what we were going to do, was looking at what other healthy institutions are doing as part of their reserves. So we can do that. I think everybody will come at that with a different answer right now. But I think it's a very good question, and I think if you would give us a little time, we'll come up with some
But the other thing is the fiscal checklist that I referred to, institutions fill that out. So if I'm a district that is growing and can capture growth dollars, that's different than our district that is looking at
Right.
an enrollment decline and a permanent reduction of funding. So that's just one factor.
Right.
Right, so you look at all these factors and then you make an assessment, and that really helps determine what kind of reserve do you need. Are we going to make reductions when we need to make them, or are we going to, plan to do them over a period of time? So all of those are factors that determine how much you need to have in reserve.
So at this point in time, I want to ask if there's anyone in the peanut gallery who wants to give their 2 cents on this question. I would be more than happy to listen to that and make sure we garner that. I will start with the person who wanted to speak first, James.
So are you talking about all salaries or just faculty salaries?
Didn't specify.
I know you did, never mind.
I did it.
The only thing I wanted to say was put in a pitch for the program plan requests, because that has completely turned around the process in CIP. There was always the question, what are we doing, what's the connection between what we're doing and resource allocation? It's been an ongoing conversation, and this has made the whole program planning process much more real for faculty, seeing the connection between how well they're doing their planning, what numbers they provide, and what potential money could follow that to help maintain or improve the program. So I'll put that out there.
Anybody else? Yes.
Have we ever tapped the 5% reserve,
Ever tapped it?
or ever used it? Or has it always been sacrosanct?
In terms of, I'm just gonna talk about this in terms of cash flow, because that's where we've been the most vulnerable. Being able to say you have a balance of $5 million is different than a cash balance. And so we have dipped below the $5 million cash balance, and that was at the all-time low when the state began to implement the deferrals and we didn't know they were coming. And we didn't have the opportunity to participate in the TRAN borrowing program because that's only offered twice a year. So we were caught by that, and we did fall below $5 million. But it happened once, and we were able to plan and get back on track quickly after that.
We've never budgeted.
We've never budgeted to be below that 5% though.
I think Trey, you said we got below 5 million, but is that below 5%?
I mean, I'm sorry, 5%
Right.
is what I meant to say.
3 million value.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to make their stick? Yes. You're welcome. Good to see you.
Having lived through challenging times at other institutions and having become increasingly aware of what this institution has survived and what the faculty and staff have survived, I would advocate for a modest increase in the restricted fund to 6%. And I would encourage the allocation for program planning. I think it's an innovative idea to provide bonuses, since it wouldn't be sustainable to do a long-term salary increase for faculty and staff. But having heard what's occurred with the morale of the faculty and staff, I think bonuses are an innovative, affirming idea to consider, as well as the importance of addressing the deferred maintenance that has occurred across the campus. So those are the things that I would encourage to elect.
Anybody else? Okay. Again, in the spirit of addressing the participatory governance workshop that happened yesterday, I want to make a couple of comments before we the first comment is to thank the faculty senate, most importantly Michael Mangan, for helping to put that on yesterday. I very much appreciated it, and actually the 2 hours went by very quickly, to be honest with you.
Just up.
I thought it did, and I thought they did an excellent job, so I want to start by thanking Lawrence.
Thank you.
The second thing I want to say is that I have made some statements here before about some of the areas in which I have a different opinion about some things that are Cabrillo-esque. And at the same time, I have tried to figure out ways that we can have meaningful discussions and meaningful dialogue at this table. In that, I believe in the leadership model that says the representation that is at the table brings forward the best opinions, minds, expertise, innovations, entrepreneurialism, whatever, that can be represented by the constituencies that are here. I believe so strongly in that model that what I would like to offer you is a continued chance as we move forward to have meaningful dialogues and to say what you need to say at this table. Not outside, not in the parking lot, but here. It doesn't mean we're going to come to a consensus. I already know that. It takes a lot of talking. I do know that too. But I want you to feel safe in saying what you need to say here. And I want you to know that it's meaningful to me when you do say it. Because I find it very helpful to be able to walk away from a meeting knowing that I think I've heard what I needed to hear. That's one of the reasons we had everybody say something at the table. Because we need to say it. Even if it doesn't necessarily come out to the fruition that we had hoped for, we need to say it. And so in that spirit, what I want to also tell you is that I rely on what you say. And when I don't hear it at this table, it's difficult for me to be the leader that I think you expect me and anticipate me to be. So what I want to end my conversation with, just in terms of participatory governance, and what I heard yesterday is, let's figure out a way as we move forward to have the courage to be who we need to be in this room. Because I've told you before, I believe this is the most important group ever. This is a huge, 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 huge opportunity for people to not only be able to work together, which I thoroughly enjoy, but to also get to know each other in a leadership paradigm. Because that's what we are. We are a leadership paradigm. Okay, so I've had my piece. I'm moving forward. I'm sure this will all be on tape. I'm sure I will regret it, but I've said what I needed to say, and I want to say at the end of that, thank you, because that's the most important part of what we need to hear me say to you, because it continues to be an honor to serve with you, and that's all I want to say. All right, with that said, and moving forward, we are going to the last information item, which has to do with strategic planning, which means it is my hope and intent that we can get to the end of today with something ready to move forward with, so that when we come back in March, because you get next week off, little dance, I would like to switch our gears and begin to talk about that magic 10,500 number we've all been discussing, and talk with you about our budget process for how we're going to manage that, because that's the role of this committee as well. Okay? Are we all in an okay place to move forward? Barbara, I always look at your face, and I never know what you think. Are you in an okay place?
Is it appropriate to respond to? You wrapped up everything really nicely, and I wanted to respond, but
Please do.
it wasn't time.
No, please do.
So out of what we just did, which is really valuable, I would like to see us be able to respond to what others have said. I don't know what the time is to do that, but for example, I said something and I heard others say other things, and then I felt mentally, oh, I would move this here and there, and that is great, and I was thinking about that, but not today. I was thinking about that a few days ago, and I'd like to see like a weaving together of our different ideas and like some, a dialogue about our responses to each other's comments, because there's some really good comments that were made. And if we're trying to actually really decide about what we can do, entrepreneurial ideas, how to raise our revenue, how to compensate folks, I forget what Cynthia said, but about folks, the morale, about how to improve morale. If we're really, grappling with those concepts and issues, I'd like to see that continue. It's hard to just say something as a snapshot and then have it be there, and then have his thing be there and your thing, and move on.
So I have two things to say to that. One is that when I think about what you're saying and I think about yesterday's presentation, I want to make sure that it's in the context of the mission of your group. So part of the reason we asked the question was because we wanted to open up that dialogue on what y'all thought about reserves. The context of the group, however, is budget process. And so what I'm hoping that we can do as we move forward is to think about what it is that we've all stated in terms of our overall hopes and dreams in terms of what was presented to us as a projected budget, and include that in the rest of our discussions that we have on all of our institutional planning pieces. So I would like to finish off, if we can, through the strategic plan piece, because we committed to that. I gave extra time today to make sure that we had that piece. I think when we come to those decisions that we're going to be talking about in terms of where we're going to put some of those dollars, I'd like you to be thinking about exactly what it is that you all said in this room, because it's going to be important to know where those actually land in terms of our own prioritizations. So I hear that. I'm going to try to move forward to get us to where I think we need to be in terms of some of our deadlines, but let's talk about those as we go through the rest of the process. Okay? Okay? I'm also very cognizant of the fact that I am not a bargaining and negotiations group. I want to make sure I honor the fact that there is a bargaining and negotiations group, and I want to make sure that we're focused on institutional planning at this point in time and moving forward with that process. So I'm gonna move a little bit, but if things come up during the discussion, if this is where you want to say, I'm not a believer in program planning or institutional planning, let's not do it. It's a good chance for you to do that. So let's see whether we practice what we're doing a little bit here and see how it goes. Okay, moving on. Strategic plan.
Go.
Just go.
All right, we've got a strategic plan, and we've got the process situation here where we're going to go to the board in the March board meeting and provide the board with an update on our 14-15 activities. And we've gone through the 14-15 activities through the Institutional Effectiveness Committee and also some of the people who indicated they were engaging in the activities, and we're bringing them here through this group to also not only be informed about the status, but to also provide any updates. One of the things that we're wanting to do in this process is keep in mind, given the event that we had yesterday, is our process structure, and a reminder that CPC is our central primary Mac Daddy governance committee, and that it has subcommittees that reference it. And Cheryl, in her wonderful pen-personship, has put the diagram up on the board so we can continuously refer to it throughout our exploration of our 14-15 activities, and then moving on to prioritize what we're going to be doing in 15-16. And part of why we have the committee structure up here is one reflection that we had in going through the 14-15 activities is that we tended to assign the activities to specific people as opposed to assigning the activities to committees. And so one of the things I'd like us to think through as we go through the committee, through the activities, is could we have assigned some of these activities to committees more than individuals? We did some committees, but I think we could do potentially more of that.
Camels on this campus, I think.
Yeah. So,
I don't get that joke. What does that mean?
A camel is a horse made by camel.
Oh, God. I was like.
Sorry, it's an
Yeah.
old.
Would someone please pass him the candy?
I still talk with my mouth full too.
okay, so the strategic plan activities, just like our accreditation activities, we've been using a smart sheet to maintain those and show their statuses. And we've got, this is the, I'm showing you the feed of the smart sheet that is editable that I and a few other people have access to like an ID. We also, a non-editable version of this is also linked on the research and planning page. If you go to the college, the strategic planning link under research and planning, we've got the first year planning activity tracker. And it shows a feed off the smart sheet that anyone can take a look at, and it's not editable so that people can't change it, but they can get a sense of what we're up to. So we're going to go through these activities, and almost certainly later tonight you're going to think, hey wait, on that activity number 26, I had something I wanted to add, and you can go back to this site and provided me an email saying this is something that I meant to say or a document I have that's related to it. So before we go into the individual blow by blow, I want to show you an overall analysis of how we structured our 14-15 activities. So I took this smart sheet and downloaded it as a spreadsheet and created a pivot table off of it to then be able to take a look at how we allocated our activities. So this is just a count of the number of activities that we assigned to each of the 5 different categories.
Do you all remember what those were, categories?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one was professional development. The second one was sustainable instructional and student services programs. The third was economic development community partnerships. The fourth was infrastructure needs. I think we called it stewardship, institutional stewardship. And the fifth was mandated opportunities.
So that now is permanently etched into your brain, and I can always just refer to that as area 2. You know what I'm talking about. So, let's go as a memory test for a while. She's I'm kind of like her Cato. I'm supposed to like test her on occasion. Make sure she stays sharp.
This is now embarrassing. Move on.
So, one thing that shows us is the number of activities we've allocated to each area, but not the magnitude of the activity. It would be very easy for a single activity to take up all the air of 10 other minor activities. So this is just a general sense of how we've allocated the activities. And we have status indicators to indicate where we're at on these activities. The blue means that we've got them completed, orange means they're in progress, and gray means it's moved to next year. So we see that the area 3 has the highest, both in absolute number and in proportion, the most completed in terms of our economic partnership activities that we allocated to ourselves this year. And then we've got an area 2, which is a lot of instruction and some student services, that has the highest proportion of still in progress, not quite yet done, yet those also tend to be some of the most complicated and longer-term activities that we're engaged in. The one item that we said that we're moving to next year is under the area 4, the infrastructure area, and that's to do with signage. And that's complicated, and we're delaying it because it's unpleasant. And we'll get to it later. So,
Actually, it was a recommendation from this committee, if you remember, that we, sorry,
yeah, no,
say that in an un-Cato-ish way.
yes. Although I believe I remembered that the minutes that CPC actually did, you guys voted that it was unpleasant, and that should be deferred.
It was, the estimate was horrifying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, unpleasant is actually downplaying the actual language that we have used. So the final thing I wanted to show off of this overall analysis of our first year activities is throwing down the responsible parties. And this is where we allocated a lot of these activities to specific people as opposed to committees. So this is where we can think about, is that the way we want to proceed? Or there's some things that we might have been better allocating to a committee. And so for those of you sitting a little bit closer, whose name do you see up there a whole bunch? Laurel. So my thought about that as we go through the activities, is this the way that we want to have our president spend her time? Are we okay with allocating all this stuff to her? And of course, I think a lot of the things that we allocated to her, many of them were complete. So maybe that's okay, but it's something to think about, how we want to allocate these activities and who we want to overload. And Laurel's a good sport, she'll take it. But something to think about. So that's the overall examination of some of these activities, and this is also,
You had a nice colored chart here right there that looks like it, right? Yeah, it's too busy.
yeah, so once you throw the name in there, it just it loses value.
That would be better.
But we can bring it back there. So here we go through the individual activities. I'm going to go to the smart sheet now, so that if there's any updates that you guys have, we can go live. So I'm going to go one by one. The ones that are completed, I'm going to go through more quickly. So we did complete the committee creation through CPC, going through and making new committees. And again, we've got that diagram up there, for example, PEDAL and the classification, prioritization, and IE. I guess 3 big committees, and then the sustainability committee, which is off of the FPAC. That was another committee. So you guys have been busy creating governance structures. So completed. Then there's a planning team in the summer. That's also been completed, and there was a little bit of release time for that. Then there was the collaborating with the staff development committee, lead on the integration of responsibilities at SDC to the new participatory governance committee. You see Vicki and Laurel also worked on that, and that's also been completed. Creating the FUX calendar for 14-15, that's done and over with. Creating activities that meet cross-training and change management themes, and again, this is Vicki and Laurel, and they worked on the theme.
And the only thing is that we created the thing, we ended up not doing change management.
Oh, right.
So we ended up doing something else. So although the goal was completed, it wasn't change management.
And then another, Vicki, Laurel et al., create budget for the committee for the year, and that was completed out of the president's budget. Then create the committee membership and committee charge, and this again, that's all been completed. So far, this is a lot of focusing on the area 1, as you notice, of the strategic plan focus area, the professional development. So a lot of those activities have been completed, so that's all good. Now we're getting into our first in progress situation. Creating a 1-semester spring plan for professional development, referencing some of the prior activities, and creating an annual plan for 15-16. And there's some TBD in terms of the funding, some coming from the president's budget, but there's some other funding sources as well. That's about halfway done. Committee's formed, but still developing the 15-16 plan. Any comments on that one, Laurel? No? And then creating links to existing constituencies, committees, and outside resources for the PEDAL committee. That's also still in progress. I think PEDAL's only met maybe once, or not even, it hasn't even met yet, so it still has a little more work to do. So that's still going on. Review the recognition process across constituencies to consolidate and provide a recognition program. That's also not done yet. It's in progress. There is some funding allocated through student equity plan and triple SP. It's related to the Pathways and Pedagogy project and the Leading from the Middle. And
I'm not sure if that has to do with the recognition.
No, it doesn't. And so the recognition process is actually the meritorious awards process. So that one needs to be changed.
this funding source? Yeah.
Well, in the meritorious awards process, just to let you know, I think we're gonna take one more year and leave it status quo, because I think the committee noted to me that they were interested in looking at the two goals that were given to them, and I don't think the task force is gonna have enough time to complete that. So I think we'll do one more year of the standard process and then move on.
And can I ask about the one above that, create links to different committees? I'm aware of, on the faculty development, staff development committee, Francine's kind of continuing to take the lead on that. I think we're meeting to start to plan flex week of fall 15 on Thursday. And I guess Alta, or is anything going on with either the classified, bless you, or the administrator branch of that, or those committees being talked about, or is that not really in there yet?
No, so the last I heard was that the date that they had chosen to have the larger committee meeting where they were gonna talk about that was in conflict, I think, with bargaining negotiations, yes? Is that right?
The time was changed.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so the meeting will happen on the 27th.
Okay, but you're moving forward on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that, actually, that group needs to meet just as the faculty and or administrative group needs to meet. For this semester, we are continuing to provide workshops through the extension process, so the classified do have that opportunity, but yes, they will need to do the classified planning for next fall.
So it changed, so down to the recognition process again. Do we have a funding source for that?
It's the president's budget.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. And then there is, just as a reminder, with the smart sheets, they do have places for discussions. And so there's some comments that were made. And this is helpful for documentation. So if you have comments during this time, I'll report some of them. And if you have a document that's related to any of these items, please send it to me, and then I can attach it on there as well for archiving purposes. Because this is part of how we show that we have integrated planning and use evidence for decision-making to ease our accreditation mandates. All right. So next, the year of instruction, and I think we're pretty darn close to done with that. Just
Well, we won't be till the end of spring.
Right.
We have all the plans made, which reminds me on the attachment, we keep it constantly updated on the faculty resource page, but the attachment you have may not be the most recent. But you could probably at the end of spring add it because it'll be done then.
okay, that sounds good. And what's our next big activity? Do you have that off the top of
It
your
was
head?
PC training on the 27th of March, as I remember.
Oh, and that date is familiar for another reason too.
Oh, yeah, annual updates due.
Yeah. All right, so that's good. So another item that's completed, and this is completed by Laurel and Rock, preparing a work plan as a result of the South County Business Roundtable that we had. That also came out of the president's budget. And did you have any other comments on that, Laurel? Okay. And then next one down, infusing instructional economic development goals from the Santa Cruz Economic Vitality Development Plan to curriculum and program plan development. So Kathy Laurel and Rock completed this related to economic development.
And that actually, if you need to see where Cabrillo is on that document is on the Santa Cruz County Supervisor's website. So we're all throughout that document.
Great, I'll put that in later.
Doesn't mean we can do everything, but we got it.
Good, and that was a big goal of Laurel. She noticed that a lot of the plans of our fellow entities in the county would do plans and by UCSC and forget about us. So kudos to Laurel for getting us involved in countywide planning. Next, another one that's complete, respond to student demand data for degrees and curriculum updates for increased transfer related to AB 1440 degrees. And here, this is the first one where we've had an interesting outcome measure. Most of the other things have just been checklists. We've done it. Here, this one specifically is intended to increase transfers. So we didn't specifically say by how much, so it gives us a bit of an edge. Because if it's by one, we'll claim victory. But we'll monitor that and see how that's going.
Well, Dennis, as I remember, the first year it was very minimal. The second year, it more than quadrupled. So, yeah, I think we're
Also, we've got to report at the Transfer Center advisory meeting that we now, for the first time in a long time, if ever, have more applicants to CSU and B than any other community college in the state. So we're now the top staff, UC Santa Cruz and CSU and B in applicants. So we're assuming that will also go to enrollees eventually.
Wow.
We're now their number one.
Wow. That's great.
Good for us, number one twice. Okay, now another in progress, the supplemental instruction implementation.
Yeah, we're hiring a staff member through temp hourly until we can figure out a permanent solution to start gearing up.
Some of the funding, I would say, is student equity.
Yes.
And is that gonna actually be done by fall, or is that not gonna be done by fall? I mean, is
What part, the equity, the SI program?
the implementation of the program, yeah?
Yeah, so we already have SI, we're just trying to increase SI,
Okay.
and so will it ever be completed? Depends on if we feel like we've maxed out on what we can offer through SI.
Okay.
For this particular phase that we're thinking about here, is there a date I could throw in?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out if it's ongoing.
So the temp hourly paperwork has just come through to me, so to hire this coordinator who's going to help us, and then we're gonna, through our planning process with, staff, we're gonna figure out if there's an integrated way we can do that.
Is that student equity and basic skills or on student equity?
No, we do have some basic skills funding going to existing SI, so you could put, we're leveraging the two.
Thank you. All right, next one down, this one's more in the planning phase. Communicate college-wide job market potential for all disciplines to consider in degree and certificate development update.
I was laughing too, that's funny.
So this is the one where we were talking about whether or not we were gonna do something that talked about every discipline that had a marketing piece to it. So if you are looking at history and you wanted to know what you could do with a history degree.
I am interested.
You kind of with an appropriate history degree. It gives you a list so that students can kind of see what you can do with a history degree. I don't think we did squat on this except look at the opportunity with CTE. I don't think any of the other disciplines were even touched.
Some of this already, I'm sorry, some of this already exists in the program plans and the introduction of the programs. That might be a place to look to.
So maybe they could just be called
Yeah,
out,
I
because I
think
think
so.
it would be a good marketing piece, actually.
And lots of the department web pages
Yes.
advertise it.
They get, and it gets used in the college night.
So this is the kind of question I need to ask, which is, do we care about this anymore? Do we want to do this? Is it important to do this? I'm fine moving forward with it. You can see not a lot of energy went into it. That's one of the questions we would ask of you today on this particular one.
So I would ask, Dijon, since you're here, is this stuff that students are asking you that might help in recruitment?
Well, I think it's always helpful in the long run to know that they can come get a degree, certificate, transfer, and then get a job. So it's helpful information. But yeah, it's long term.
Okay, yeah.
I think this also impacts student employment center, particularly with our job fairs, our college and career night that Outreach has put on. So there is quite a bit of coaching and counseling happening in student employment around degree and certificates and transitioning that to jobs, either summer jobs, part-time jobs, or full-time. And I know that's the focus of the April job fair coming up on April 29th.
So I'm hearing you say, do you think this would be helpful?
I think it's helpful. So I think we need to hone in on it a little bit in terms of what the outcomes are really going to be. It seems really broad, the way it's stated right now.
And it seems like this is going on already
Yeah.
at the individual small
Particularly
areas,
student
but do we want to
services.
make some kind of.
Right, right. Yes.
So just to help Michael with his future career plan.
You're in it too.
Yeah, we are together.
You could be a
yes.
dean.
So, oh God. So where I came from, we have a nice list of what can you do with a history degree. At the top of the list would be a preacher. Because, I mean, well, whatever. Anyway.
Hallelujah.
Or international business. I'm interested in highlighting, and I would not pass on that opportunity being from the humanities, that in addition to the job is skills.
Yeah.
Because not necessarily A leads to Z. There's a lot of points in between that the students have options, and they need to know that. And in fact, one of the things that helped us was to highlight who are some of our most successful graduates. The mayor of South Bend was a history major, so, I mean, you can do a lot of things with Michael's degree.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that we take number 16, that we pull out the specifics to that, and look at things that we could do that we currently already have, but then look at specific opportunities that would help with outreach and marketing. So I will take that forward. Okay, thanks.
Okay, next, continue with ESL improvement plan. This is happening, I think AB 86 is really taking a big lead on helping develop this. And we've got a big workshop not this Friday, but next Friday, to help people design non-credit curriculum. So that's a big one. I don't know if you have anything to add, Jim, or kind of about time. So I think we're good there.
ESL.
Okay.
The camera pointing this way.
No, they don't want that.
Yes, here you go.
So a couple more completed, reviewing with the Distance Ed Committee, the Santa Cruz Economic Report. So Francine and crew did that. Implement the
Cyber session.
the DE plan. And so we got more cyber session going there. So that's how that happened. Review and plan for increased pathways and transfer articulation with CSUMB. And we've been engaging with
I would
them on
actually
that.
say that that's more than halfway done. Would anybody else agree that it's 3/4 done with some of the things we're working on now? Yeah?
If you say so.
I think it is. I think we're 3/4 of the way there.
All right, exciting. We advanced the Harvey Ball.
Because the dual admissions
Yeah.
agreement will also be part of that.
So let's make it 3. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Then here's the to-do for Dennis. Plan and implement increased outreach to high schools to increase articulation in high school students.
Thank you, Leslie and Dijon, incredible job. Yeah, I think where it's at was good.
Okay, good. Then the next one is a big one in terms of timeline. Continue orientation and education planning for students through the Student Success Act implementation. Sounds like we're pretty close to done with that phase of it.
Yeah, I would say that by the end of this semester, we should say it's done. I mean, it's always ongoing, but it's the initial implementation is done and we'll use it.
Great. All right, then here's a few. Looks like Kristen's coming into the action now, and employees who are no longer here.
Give it to him.
Exactly. Possible membership in the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. So we join Santa Cruz Works instead. Then we contacted some technology companies about potential partnerships, and we did that. Some focused follow-up. So again, this is back at the South County Business Roundtable, and this is a subset of activities related to technology in particular, I believe. And that's done. Review and integrate the Santa Cruz County Economic Development Report. So we were
That's done.
complete on that. More South County priority response. This one in particular about internship programs.
So that can actually be changed to the online internship portal, the countywide online internship portal. Because that's the actual goal that we're getting done. So that's actually gonna be an online portal for any business to be able to find any possible intern from our area, from K through 12, and nonprofits and the like can actually put in a search word. It will come up with the student's information piece. It's almost like online dating, except it's internships. And it's really going to be cool.
And it's multi-camp, so UCSC is going to contribute.
I wouldn't go that far
No,
yet.
or they have their own thing. That's right. So okay. Then increase systematic marketing to communities, create the annual report, which was done, and communications to K-12, and trying to reach out to high school and non-traditional populations. So that was an annual effort that Kristen and Faculty Senate and Student Senate, that's completed. Implement the college portal. That's really in its beginning stage. Are we still at a quarter done, Dennis?
No. But, yeah.
Okay.
And is that ongoing?
Yes. It's gonna probably till fall of 16 before we're complete. Because we've just now started the process and we're hoping to bring somebody in to help us. It's gonna take a while.
Is it not done because there's no money?
No, we just bought the software, and the biggest part of implementing is not an IT issue. It's setting up the governance for the portal and then building that piece. So, and that takes a long time. In my past experience, it takes about 3/4 to a year to do all that process so that we use it right.
Having a portal for one-stop shopping for students and faculty is really important.
Correct. Yeah, and we want to do it right.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that should be up the list of things, and
we're working on it.
So remember what happened? We didn't get the Title V grant, remember that? Because the portal was gonna be in the Title V grant. So what we did instead is we looked at different ways of trying to find some funding for that. So we've actually found a way to fund it. The second piece, however, is gonna be figuring out how to develop that development team, because every single group has to come in and really talk about what they need in their section of the portal. So it's gonna be a big deal. And it's also gonna be a big deal to do the student email process as well, because that's gonna,
Spring and I are working on it.
That's gonna be
Trying to get
good.
it started.
Somebody had their hand
In
up.
the spring, first of summer.
Well, I was gonna ask if it got fully funded, because last I heard that it didn't. So where did the funding come from?
We got it all from SSSP, and part of it's the carryover money that we, for positions that we couldn't use, because it's one-time money. So we're gonna fund it out of that.
Out of the council?
No, it's SSSP, but not SUNY. So
Carryover from.
carryover that we, because, you know, we had positions that maybe we didn't get filled, so we have that money that's left that we're gonna use out of it, so that, because we have to spend it by December 31st of this year, so we're gonna use our grant money to do all that. We've got enough to do it.
Or just add it to the general reserve.
You can stab it.
I'll tell you something, if we can get the portal done, it will be huge, because the communications with students alone is just, it's huge. It's just huge.
It comes with a phone app too, doesn't it?
Comes with a mobile app.
Mobile app. Yeah, mobile app, so.
Actually, that's a little separate, but yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we're being extra happy. Okay, good. Then I'll go through these completed ones. Convincing people that Cabrillo is affordable and a quality place to go. So we've convinced everybody. I mean, there was a specific activity that was engaged in for that to help promote that. There was some extension course creation and hiring staff related to that. That was done. And then continuing to inform the community about alternative programs. And some of these, we mark them as done, yet they're also ongoing, but they were done in the 14, 15, and so we're calling it done, even though we may, and probably will still continue it. Continue to implement the tech plan, and so that's continuing forward, and we're also updating the tech plan as well. This one's almost done, provide professional development for tech use on campus. So there was already some money allocated for some professional development goals there. That's almost done.
Are those the videos? Were those the videos that we were gonna do so that people could actually know how to use the technology in the rooms?
That was part of it.
Okay. And then there were other technology pieces like Astra and some other things like that, right?
Yeah, there's some training there. So that's probably something to check in the spring now too.
Yeah. I think it's probably.
So just go ahead.
And you had asked for a list of those videos.
And facilities has done that too.
So everything now, what we're trying to do now is train people with the videos so that you can have a video and know what to do with whatever alarm system or whatever else you're having to deal with a video.
Well, the important thing is that people know how to access those videos. I don't think it's real clear. If I want to learn that,
So
where I
if
go
you
get
go
that.
to the web pages for facilities, for example, they're right in the middle, you just click on.
Okay.
So
I
it's
think
a
doing
long.
a good PR would be good for
Yeah,
that.
we could do that. I think they were sent out, but we can do that again.
Wait, I'm sorry, what is there? The different videos are there? On index? Okay, but what are the?
There aren't that many. There are a couple for facilities. One is on how to use the burglar alarm, beyond the burglar alarm system.
How to get in and out of the classroom every time you put it
Are we doing those for students yet? I know different instructors do those individually.
IT is used a lot for different applications that they've rolled out. They have one, I think, for smart classrooms, how to use the equipment in a smart classroom.
For instructors, okay.
Yeah, so one is on the fleet. So IT started this, facilities is newer to the process, so.
So the one we're working on for students, which isn't on our plan, so we don't get credit for it, but we're doing it, is the one that's gonna be the orientation for the CCC apply process, because Merle couldn't apply.
Is that what you were doing?
Yeah. So,
We should ask her.
so.
I thought you were applying for financial aid.
No, I was just trying to apply. So we do have one in the works for students this house. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, but the smart room, is the smart room up somewhere? Is there a smart room video?
Do you want to go to IT?
You can just say where it is.
Well, I think they're on the.
Help us.
Smart classroom and lab instructions.
There it is.
So IT's further along on this.
Yeah, there's LMOs,
Show off.
Joe, not that anyone's saying anything about that.
He said they started it.
It's in their physical space.
Great. Then related to that, consider areas on campus where tech can support training, component education, so this is very much related. This is another completed one. Create and give proposal to foundation for resource donations for program needs, prioritizing athletics for 14-15. Content areas including women's studies, welding, and horticulture.
And the funny thing is that women's studies, welding, and horticulture are the ones that have been completed, and athletics is going a little different.
Yeah, how would you do that?
We've gone a little different
I was
direction
just,
on
I just saw that.
that. Different direction.
So you prioritize something with the needs.
Wanna wake me up, talk about it?
All right, this one's almost done. Create a formal response to the Ed Master Plan for facilities and infrastructure needs, and you're updating the Ed Master Plan and the Facilities Master Plan, and it's happening as we speak. We had a big series of meetings yesterday, and that'll be fun. And that'll
Come back here
Yeah.
for you guys
Well,
to review.
actually, facilities planning committee is the steering committee
That's
for
right.
that plan,
That's
as they
right.
have been in the past,
That's right.
but it will come here
That's right.
as well.
So going back to the diagram, we will follow the process. So go from facilities
I got it.
to CPC, and then after the constituent groups was an info item as needed, right? Okay. Looks like a facilities video that demonstrates facilities accomplishments and needs for internal and external communities. They've posted some as we just saw. It looks like there's a few more that they're finishing up before we can mark this totally complete. This one just got it started. Oh, well, consider contract for updating campus signage. This is the one that we moved to next year, the unpleasant task. Consolidate the CIFT, that's the Climate Initiative Task Force with the Sustainability Committee has completed. It's up on the diagram, so we're good. That's a subcommittee of PAC. Continue to support the student success plan. So that phase of activities was completed by Dennis and his crew. And looking at partnership opportunities, that's been done. More through extension, that's been done. Aligning program plan timelines, so we've done that, and that's posted on my website. And then consolidate the faculty grants, student senate, grants, foundation grants to apply resources to the faculty program plan requests. So that's in progress. It's almost done. It's connected to the centralized resource request form that CIP and I have been working on, and faculty senates. They've been part of it mostly as far as they've been involved through CIP.
So this one has some faculty that are not happy with this,
Thanks.
and I have actually asked them to come and meet with me. I have not heard back from either one of those people yet, so I will follow up on that, because I think the evaluation of the process is part of what I promised that I would do. So I will follow up with that.
Yeah, I don't know if you wanna make that clock move back to half done, or keep it at 3/4, but it's kind of, we're in the middle of the transition, I think.
Right, I would agree,
And Terrence, you're talking about two different things. You're talking about the resource form, which is one thing that will put all the requests into a large database for prioritization. That's one thing. The other thing is the process that Michael's referring to.
Yeah, and I think the Student Senate has said that they don't necessarily want to consolidate their grants to keep kind of that pool available.
The one thing that people did ask for in this, besides just some of the conversations that we need to have, was a common form. So what I did get back from faculty members on this was that they weren't happy that there were two separate forms and that they had to fill out two separate things to go through two separate
I don't think they did. I think the students accepted the.
They did this year, but
Okay.
I don't know that's ongoing, so
Okay.
that's something to think about and to talk about as we move forward as well. That came forward too.
And then the next one, it's very much related, the idea of an integrated program plan template. I think probably, again, more CIP than Senate per se, but not totally disconnected either. So we've got a meeting on Friday to do some finalization on that. And then create and disseminate college timeline for all mandated responsibilities. And I think
That's done, we just haven't met to approve it. So it's completed, but it needs to come back here for approval. That'll happen in March. We just haven't had a meeting to approve it.
Complete the accreditation planning agendas and recommendations. So we marked it as 3 quarters. Most of it is done, particularly the stuff that we assign to ourselves, the planning agenda items. The accreditation recommendations, we've been making good progress. We'll probably need to revisit those again in more detail, but not today.
But IE did revisit them in detail.
Yeah, last
Just
week
last
IE went
week.
over these and the accreditation. We're basically in good shape. So I think we'll be fine. And if not, well, we'll be fine. And continue implementation of the SSSP. We've got that half done. It's another one of those ongoing type of activities. We might combine some of these. And the very last one's done, the board policies and procedures, which of course is where I found this diagram. Actually is from the online version of the board policy manual, which is complete. So good for us. So if you have any thoughts about any of those activities after this, again, it's posted on the web under Pro, under the strategic planning section. You can take a look at it. Any documents that are related to it, any thoughts or comments that you have at any point, just let me know, and I can do a central communication note for that. So that was this year that we're in. Now it's time to move on to planning for next year. So we've got, as you recall, the strategic plan that we passed here we went through the year-long visioning process and went through all the committees. And again, on that website, we've got the 5-year plan, which was essentially a to-do list in the 5 different areas of things that we can choose to do over the 5 years. And then what we did last year was we bolded items that we wanted to focus on in 14, 15. And so as you go through the plan, the items in bold were those items that we identified as priority, and then we just went through the detailed activity lists that are related to these priorities. Now, 15, 16 is upon us, and it's time to think about what we want to do next year in terms of priorities. Which of these items are big enough that we want to carry them over to a second year? And we've got a couple already. Which items do we want to say, well, that was good for year 1, let's let it go? And then which items did we not attend to in year 1 that we want to attend to in year 2? Keeping in mind that there's still subsequent years to go forward as well. So we, to prepare for this, we did bring this through to admin council to take a look at it and give some initial thoughts. And now we're bringing it here to get some more feedback and direction as to where we want to assign some priorities. So what I've done is I've taken the document and items that are on the potential list for bringing forward into next year are highlighted in magenta because that's what Laurel wanted. And she was inspired by Pam Deegan.
Pink.
Well, pinkish, magenta-ish.
I like magenta.
And so this is also to remind us of our enrollment management session that we had, because it's part of what helps to drive our efficient allocation of resources. And then, as you'll note, I think Cheryl is also trying to help visually reinforce this image of preparing for the 15-16, as you know from a wonderful magenta top. So.
That eyes in the back of your head.
So,
You know, people are actually still listening to you. That's the thing that's really great. They all have a joke. That was great. I was amazed. Yay!
well,
Well, there's only one response.
well, I've got to be the most interesting thing in the room because the fellow stopped climbing up and down the ladder because I was on pins and needles watching that. Things occasionally falling off.
When shoes go, nothing goes forward.
I'm glad Joe wasn't here, he'd be completely freaking out.
I was. No, he was good. He is here. That's what he's on.
All I was thinking is
That's funny, that's funny.
So, I'm gonna start with area 1 because it comes first. And so those items in bold, those are what we had identified as priorities last year. Items that are in italic, admin council was recommending as considering to bring in as a new priority for this year. And then we can, here, of course, you guys get to pick whatever you want. So I'm kind of guessing though this first one's a bit of a gimme. The professional development, that's really ongoing activity. It's a big deal. We just have the pedal committee, which is a central activity of this particular initiative, is just getting started. So some assumption that will want to be continued. And then the 2 items brought up for consideration, review and improve current professional development website. Seems like the information node, that there's a ripeness to that activity. And then updating job expectations and skills for all employees. And there's an augmented phrase here to support equity and success, since that's a big thing that we've got. So we want to make sure that we can support those big initiatives that we've got going on and to target PD for professional engagement on that. So I want to open it up now to you guys. Reflections on, do these look good, or is there something you would have had instead? Too many, not enough, we hate magenta.
So just a reminder how this actually happened. We put down a plethora of things because it's a 5-year plan. And the intent was to be able to take those things on an annual basis, implement them. You don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel on approving because we went through that entire process last year. So this is really about what CPC would like to recommend as the next year's goals. It doesn't mean the rest of them won't get done in the next 3, it's just for next year. That's really what it's about. To review the professional development websites, I will tell you a little bit about what that is. One of the things that Francine and I had discussed was being able to procure some kind of software that would allow faculty and others to sign into a workshop, register for a workshop, do an online recommendation for their flex activities, so that instead of doing all the paperwork that we continue to do, you can submit it online and be done with it. Because most institutions have that as part of their flex opportunity and part of their professional development. So that's something I would like to personally, if we can, commit to next year, because I think it would be helpful for everybody.
There's a lot of paper involved right now, a lot of the processes.
Right, and it would be nice to be able to have a head count of people that are coming to a workshop, because it's good to know what you're planning for, and right now it's sort of hit and miss. So it's just helpful, I think, in planning too.
And can I ask why 1.1.2 was not thought of for something to look at next year? That's the implements the California Community College Student Association Professional Development Recommendation.
Because Michael Maynard was right on
No.
February 18th.
Which one? We had a bet on this and I lost. This actually came with funding, and it was supposed to be in the governor's proposal. So the Student Success Plan has professional development as part of what it's asking every single college to take. The funding that comes with it didn't get into the governor's budget. So.
And I said it
At
would.
least in the
And
January.
you said it wouldn't, right, so I don't know where that's headed. I'm just letting you know that that's, I'm sure at some point going to be funded. I hope he doesn't agree, we'll see.
So it's an unfunded mandate that
Right
may
now,
never, may
yes.
never be funded.
But see, I just heard yesterday that part of the 200 million for student success, part of that may be professional development. They may pull it out.
And put it in that?
Because it's student success, professional development is part of the student success task force. So they may pull it out instead of for triple SP or student equity, part of that may be professional development. They're negotiating, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what will happen, but that's the last I heard, sure.
Okay. I
So
noted it
then-
because I know that those are planned. They actually had a group that actually went through all of it. So there are noted development opportunities already. There's just no money.
So then, on a more general note then, how nimble can any of these strategic plans be? If, say, we decide to have our 15-16 plan be, mostly agree with the magenta items, and then in the May revise and the budget that passes in January, that starts to get funded.
It is extremely nimble, and that was the point of having more than less, because we could mix and match and exchange out. That's exactly why we did as many as we could up front, so that we could do just exactly what we did. Why don't you move on to the next one? Because we can send these out to you.
Yeah, there's, again, you don't have to have all your thoughts contained in this time frame. Okay. Number 2, sustainable services. This is instruction and student services. And so they won't all fit on one page unless I make it too small. So at the top, there's these first 5 items. They're in bold, so they were items that are identified as first-year priorities. They're pretty big and complicated. So the thought is that we want to continue most of those. And in the spirit of not chewing too much at once, the 2.2 was relaxed a bit. Might pick it up again later. But there's the identifying, preparing for anticipated growth areas, and then still considering acceleration or other transformational changes, providing for growth at distance ed, and articulation pathways to K-12, which is related to PEDAL as well. So those are some bigger ones that take a little bit of time. And then scrolling down so you can see some of the other items. So there's some other things going on. One that was identified was to increase and centralize tutorial services and supplemental instruction. So this is being recommended as an item to consider, partly because it's already underway. George, he's nodding his head, so that's good. Or any other information on that?
I defer to Jim.
We're in the process of using the resources that we have in terms of instructional assistance and trying to align our resources there with the demand that we have for English language learners, whether they're coming in for ESL reading or English, and to provide more tutoring services more broadly.
So when the word centralize goes there, has that created fear among your various?
A little bit. I mean, because what we're really doing right now is we're trying to look at this from the point of view of the students who come in. The distinctions between a reading lab and an ESL lab and an English writing center when they're going in for tutoring is really sort of lost on the student. When they come to the central area, we want to be able to have them come in, say, I need help with this paper. A couple of specific questions to tell them where they need to go. And then they don't need to sign in if they need help with maybe an ESL class and they're also in another class, or they're in an English 1A class and they're taking a history class. They may need help with papers on both of those. It's helpful to know where they're coming from and just to provide that information to whatever tutor's available. Sometimes things are very, very hectic in the ESL lab and things are less so in the writing center. And we want to have the ability to have all the instructional assistants who have the qualifications to help those students be available to them. So it's basically what we're doing. We have a limited number of instructional assistants. We want to make sure that they're available to the students who need them instead of sort of some arbitrary walls that reflect the departments, but not so much the needs of the students. So we're trying to we're trying to turn it around and take it from the point of view of a student and make it as painless as possible to walk in and get some help. So,
Here, and it's a great goal, and that's the, and all the centers to the extent that we can do that, that's
and
great.
the faculty and the staff are on board with this. We've got some study groups going to figure out the details. All I basically said is, we are probably not going to get new staff. So let's find a way to use the staff to meet the student needs the best way we possibly can. And most everybody's pretty much on board trying to hammer out a good way to do that.
How are we doing with 2.7?
Good question. Great. So, we've actually got some finalists for the position of grant manager, and in the next 2 to 10 weeks, if the final phase goes well, that person should be on board, and then start their activities of bringing in, helping to consolidate some of our current processes and helping with processes on current grants, and then also doing prospect research to bring in new grants.
Yes.
I don't know if it belongs in here, but some months ago at some meeting, I don't remember where, there was a rumor going about that there was a possibility that we might consider allowing auditing classrooms, but associated with a
We audit all the time.
That's happening now.
fee. I thought we really can't allow auditing. I thought that was.
We audit a lot in visual and performing arts division, and not a lot, in POC. I mean, it's been going on for a long time.
And then they pay for that audit.
Yeah,
And
they
that
pay for
money
it.
stays here. So
And just go to continuing ed?
We're in the process of making it more centralized in A&R. Tama and Sky are working on that, but currently they have to go to extension and pay for it. But we have a list of what costs can be audited, so if.
So I guess that's the, is there any thought about expanding that?
That's up to the program. You talk to, it's up to each program, each department.
It does come with some rules, so, and the state is looking at the audit opportunity as well, because the fees are pretty low.
We don't set that.
No, they're trying to it's legislative. They're trying to raise it, so it's closer to.
So if the math department decided to say if there's room in a 154 class, it's already there, and then somebody has got 154, but they want to sit in and audit so they're prepared for 152. At this point, right, and at this point, we're saying, no, we can't do this. We're not
Well, that's
allowed
because
to.
you math are not on the audit list.
But it's up to us to ask them.
You talk to Wanda. But here's the rule. You have to first fill it with credits.
Totally get it,
Yeah.
right. We would never want to take a seat.
And actually, they are very well handled and treated in extension. I got to go down and have that process, and it's actually worked pretty well. So, kudos to that grant program.
They don't pay any fees though, do they?
Yeah, they do.
Tech fee?
They
Oh,
pay.
those fees. I don't mean about the.
No, they have, there's one, I just learned this. There's one fee that they do pay, there's one that they do not. I don't remember which percentage, but there is one student fee that they do pay.
Student health fee, but they don't pay the student.
Yeah. So, I just learned that.
This is the nurse, but not my doctor.
That is correct.
And I also want to note that as we've been progressing, as we complete things, it's completed. So we're basically done with ADTs. Good for us, the leaders in the state. So, all right, so I'll let you guys chew on this number 2 a little more, move on to number 3, just so you guys get a chance to see a little bit of everything. So number 3, again, community partnerships and economic vitality. Again, a recommendation of continuing a lot of the ones that are longer term. We did increase a lot of business partnerships, so we did complete that one, even though we changed it from Silicon Valley to Santa Cruz. One recommendation of continuing enhancing partnerships with community businesses for the internships. A new one for this year, integrating student equity and basic skills planning to create opportunities for marginalized populations. That seemed timely. The marketing plan, this one, so this is interesting. So this one, we marked it as completed and ongoing as compared to 3.7, which we marked as in progress and ongoing. And so this, it's a little tricky sometimes to indicate, when you've got a process that you're going to do basically forever, like marketing. There's a significant push that was done within this year, and we completed it, yet we want to signal that it doesn't mean we'll stop in marketing, it just means we'll implement the plan. So that's the intent of the language there, as opposed to the 3.7, which we can't, we've somewhat completed it in terms of finding the sustainable alternatives through community ed, but there's still a little more work to be done on that. So again, that's the thought of the recommendation there in terms of the progress and ongoing. But some of the new ones recommended to be considered for this next year, continuing to provide the community with arts, entertainment, and ed opportunities, enhancing opportunities for regular community input, which, especially in light of our discussion yesterday, it's always good to try to get the input so we can make good decisions. And then last, seek innovative partnerships and opportunities with businesses, K-12s, and universities. So I think this last year we sought and received non-innovative partnerships, and now we want to go for the innovative partnerships.
So I would like to make a recommendation to myself, which is probably not appropriate, but if we go to the top, I would like to take 3.1 off the list. I think it's done. I think we've completed what we needed to do with that task. I think there are other things that speak to additional partnerships. I would like to take that one off.
Take something off your list.
Thank you. I'll take it.
Well, can I just ask, I mean, take it off the list if there's anything you have to do, but isn't it nice to grow the
Yes.
the
Yes.
Santa Cruz side of it?
Yes, I just think we'll crow at the board meeting when we do our update, and then I'd like them to know I'm not taking that one forward to do additional things in that venue next year. But I would love to put
Okay.
on that.
So that's an extra level of doneness. Done and
Going with the bird
done.
theme.
Oh, and another one that we finished was 3.6, as we noted in our activities, participating in strategic planning activities of other agencies. And note, something to note further too, this one wasn't bold, right? So we didn't highlight it as a priority last year, yet we did it anyway. Which speaks to some of the flexibility that we have. That if we have an opportunity to knock something off the list, we can do that. So, given the time, I'm just going to keep rolling. That's cool.
If we make any money from these innovative partnerships and whatnot with businesses, does it go into the unrestricted fund?
I think
So-
it depends. It's probably the same answer.
So part of what I would like to do is to consider ways, on the one hand, we're trying to bring in additional revenues and one-time monies, right? Okay, so that was on my plate to continue to do that. We're gonna continue to do that. I think the next question is to figure out, with those additional revenues, whether there's a formula or percentage that we would look at as to what comes back to what sectors. In order to be able to say that there would be some one-time monies that come from revenues to go to particular funds. What we've done here in the past has been a little haphazard in terms of where people have pulled in additional dollars. Sometimes they've owned them themselves, sometimes they have not. If we can codify what it is that we have percentage-wise, it's much more transparent. Everybody will know who's getting what, and I think there's a way to actually do that so that it is meaningful to bring in those one-time monies and you can see broader institutional approaches. If someone does a fundraiser and they want to sell the Dunkin' booth with the president in it, and on the fundraiser for the Dunkin' booth with the president, they are saying that will go directly to student clubs, that's fine.
they'll go directly to student clubs. But revenue producers that we're making out of programs and services, I think we need to have a process for that. So I'm beginning to look at that right now.
I was just thinking of three things that I've seen that would really be good if it was money that was stopping us from moving forward. That's the student portal, the signage on campus, and finishing up the grants and contract fees. So if I was going to get some money from external sources and I needed money for these things, I would do that to make these things happen really quick.
Yes, and yes, that's all I'm gonna say, I would agree. So the whole point of bringing in revenue as one of the strands of things that we've committed to is to figure out how it can come back to the college in a more particular way that will happen. Aside from people who just do fundraisers that's specific to it, who I don't wanna impinge.
Great. And I'm going to roll through the next two combined just to flash them up there. I think these will be pretty non-controversial. So this is Joe's to-do list, and also Springs. That's how I think of section 4. So it's a lot of this continuation with the upgrading the technology, smart classrooms, things like that. Making sure that's happening. And then number 11, that's the new one. So that's the student portal, essentially. So it's in motion, seemed logical.
And videotapes.
Videotapes. And we had a couple of completeds, the Climate Initiative Task Force and implementing the online student planning module. So getting things done, good for us. And another possible consideration for next year would create opportunities for innovation within the framework of a sustainable budget. And then standardizing resource requests, which was a priority last year. It's not quite done. Seems like a good one to continue over. Then going down to 5, the got to do what you got to do section, aka our mandatory and institutional responsibilities. So continuing on, a recommendation to continue on with the accreditation standards. Seems like a good idea. And then this year bringing up, highlighting, so again, completing mandatory reporting accurately and on time. Why is it on the plan and it's something that you should always do? Yet it's important to really put an extra focus on it every now and then, review your processes, make sure things are really tight. With all the new reporting that we've got going on and changes, this seems like a good year to highlight that potentially. And then another carryover recommendation with the Student Success Act. The board policies, we pretty much we have completed that, done and done. Okay. So we got that one good for us. So that's a preview then. Obviously we're out of time. We'll probably then be coming back.
So what we'd love to have you do is to make sure that you're okay with these as they are. If not, please bring back your comments. We'll take that first thing.
This magenta document.
This will be posted on the CPC website under what? Handouts? Yes. Okay, so take a look at that. The next thing that you just need to know is at some point we need to assign these hopefully to committees now that we've created. That was the intent. So let's think about whether or not we know where they will go or responsible parties.
Just before anybody leaves, I asked John Dofsky and Michael if anybody was going to post the slides, and I think John responded that it's up on the website, the slides for this first presentation.
Great.
So thank you guys.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you for your attendance. All right, I think we are done for the day. Thank you for all your diligence and hard work. I appreciate it.
Just in time.
Well, no, I was gonna say because we have a meeting.
Nice timing.